Welcome to the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. I have a returning guest today, Gabriel Gaarden. He is a registered dietitian and a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He has some great tidbits for us last week, and he's joining us again today. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hi, Gabriel. How are you? Welcome back.
Hi, Nancy. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I just couldn't get enough the last time, so I had to ask you back because I have some more questions that I'm sure my viewers want to know your answers to.
Great.
So if you're
I'm
ready,
happy to answer.
if you're ready, I'm going to shoot them for you. I want to know, what is your take on fats?
Great question and big topic. We could probably do multiple podcasts just about this topic alone. So fats are something that they're essential for the human body, right? We use certain fats to synthesize certain molecules, I believe, certain hormones in our body. Don't quote me on that off the top of my head. But we don't need a lot of fat in our diet. You know, the only fats that we specifically need are the fats that are called essential fatty acids, just like the essential amino acids. These are things that our bodies cannot synthesize on their own. They need, or from other components that come in from our diets. We need to specifically get those individual nutrients exogenously or from the outside. And so, but of course, our essential fatty acid requirements are very minimal. And those include, those are the omega-3 fatty acids, or the omega-3 precursors, at least, the omega-3 and the omega-6 fatty acids. And so we're going to get omega-3, or at least the precursors, in a plant-based diet from a type of fat called alpha-linolenic acid, ALA for short. And we get that in abundance in a lot of our nuts and seeds. So specifically, the best source is going to be flax. We got to grind it, because if you eat whole flax, it's just going to go in one end and out the other. You know, we can't digest it and break it down. So we have to put it in a coffee grinder or something and grind it up, or buy it pre-ground. It's going to last a long time in the fridge, so make sure that you keep it in a sealed container. What I'll do is I'll buy, like Costco's had this big bag of Bob's Red Mill, like golden flax that's already ground up, and it's going to last me for months and months. So I'll keep that in the freezer because I want to make sure that it doesn't go rancid. The thing about these omega-3 acids is that they'll go rancid and they'll be no good if they're exposed to air and to heat for too long of a period of time. So I keep that in the freezer, put a rubber band around it or whatever, and seal it up real good. And then I'll just pour that into a glass jar that I keep in my refrigerator, because it'll easily last for several months also in the fridge. And that's what I'll use to sprinkle on my oatmeal in the morning, or to put in a smoothie, things like that. And so, or you can use it in baking, as a way to make an eggless egg. So flaxseed's wonderful, great source of alpha-linolenic acid. The body will convert that into the several longer chain essential fatty acids that we need for both our brain health as well as our cardiovascular health. And those fatty acids are known as EPA and DHA. So our bodies take ALA and they convert it into EPA and DHA to maintain our health. And then, of course, omega-6, that is... there's alpha-linolenic acid, and then there's omega-6 is something different, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, we get omega-6s in abundance from all kinds of different foods. Other great sources of ALA, or the omega-3 precursors, chia seeds, again, grind them. Walnuts are going to be your best nuts for ALA. And then hemp seeds are also great too. They're abundant sources of our ALA, our omega-3 precursors. But on top of that, and we only need about a tablespoon or two of those different nuts or seeds in order to meet the level of ALA that we need on a daily basis to meet our essential fatty acid needs. So it's very minimal, 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of these foods. And on top of that, we can pretty much just eat other whole plant foods that are low in fat, dark leafy greens, so different vegetables, fruits, whole intact grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts and seeds, of course, have that ALA. And then herbs and spices. But there's nothing wrong with incorporating more fat into our diet, because fat, of course, is a great way to satiate hunger. It's filling, or it can be. And then it also, for the most part, on top of it being filling, it just is a great way to add texture and flavor to our meals. The problem is in modern day society, because fat tastes so good, a lot of pre-made foods and of course restaurant foods, fast foods, put way more fat into the food than our bodies actually need to maintain optimal health. And that's because when we add a lot of salt, oil, and sugar to the food, we can make it hyper palatable. That means we make it super flavorful to the point at which people want to keep coming back for more and more. And often they have trouble putting down the food and saying, you know, I've had enough to eat, because it tastes so good that we end up consuming too much of it, leading to some of our key problems like overweight and obesity.
So it's like
exactly. Yeah, there's certainly, and they pay, you know, food scientists that work for a lot of our, you know, conglomerated food corporations, these big food corporations that are, you know, multinationals and that are, you know, very powerful, that have, you know, huge budgets. They pay, you know, professionals who've devoted their entire careers to making foods hyper palatable. And so these food scientists work in laboratories and they combine different ingredients at very specific ratios to make sure that they can trick our brains into, of course, initiating these dopamine responses, our pleasure centers in our brain, to make sure that we get, quote unquote, we develop a dependence or an addiction to these foods and we keep coming back for more. And so it's important for people to know, the more we can reach for whole foods and whole sources of fat, as opposed to processed foods and more processed sources of fat, the better, right? So if I want to eat if I want to consume some olive fat, there's nothing wrong with incorporating a little bit of olive oil into your diet. The problem is most people are getting way too much fat and way too much oils, vegetable oils, all kinds of vegetable oils, not just olive oil, into their diets on a daily basis. And so go ahead.
And that was my next question. How do you feel about oils?
Oils, exactly. So oils, I try to use as little oil. You know, I don't have any oil here at my house. We don't cook with oil. We can water saute. We can cook with steam. We can boil. We can bake. We can broil. And so we tend to incorporate those other cooking methods. I'm going to saute my vegetables in a pan with just a little bit of water or a little bit of vegetable broth, as opposed to using oil. I still keep the vegetables from sticking. They still get a ton of flavor because I'm incorporating all the herbs and spices that I mentioned. That's going to bring a lot of flavor. Now, undoubtedly though, if you saute with a little bit of olive oil, that has that wonderful magical capacity of kind of igniting and helping to augment, or what's the other word that I'm looking for? You know, it kind of helps to exponentiate or augment flavors to a certain degree. If you are to saute your onions and garlic and other aromatics in a little bit of olive oil combined with all of your wonderful herbs and spices. And so there's nothing wrong with using a little bit of oil. I would just say, be very careful with the amount that you use. A little goes a long way, and most people use way too much of it, too much. But you can easily replace oil in a lot of your cooking by using those methods that I already discussed. And I usually try to go for the whole food sources of fat. So I prefer to eat olives instead of olive oil. I'll sprinkle a few Kalamata olives on a homemade pizza that I make at home, or a homemade salad, because they're full of flavor and they have all that healthy olive fat in them, but they also have fiber, carbohydrate, protein, and a whole other spectrum of different vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. Phyto means plant. It's the scientific word for plant. They have all these other plant-based nutrients that give you a wonderful spectrum of nutrition that you don't get from eating olive oil alone. With olive oil, all you get is just fat and some vitamin E. When I eat an olive, I get just hundreds of different things when I eat an olive. And I have the fiber in the olive, which helps reduce the rate at which my body will absorb that fat. And that's super important. We don't want to absorb carbohydrate or fat super rapidly into our system, because that can create inflammation within our vascular system, within our blood vessels. Anytime I add fiber to a meal, it's going to reduce the rate at which the fat or the carbohydrate gets, infused or absorbed into my bloodstream. So anytime you can choose a whole food source of fat, as opposed to a fat that has been processed into an oil, that's going to be ideal.
Awesome. Tell me about spices.
Spices are great. They're some of the most concentrated source of plant-based, phytochemicals, different nutrients that we have on the planet, because in many cases they've been dried. And anytime you dry something, you're basically concentrating its nutrients because you're removing all the water out of it. And so different herbs and spices have been proven through randomized controlled trials. Those are considered some of our like gold standards in scientific research in terms of its quality and its rigor. They've been proven in scientific studies to do a number of different things for our health, reducing inflammation in the body. And of course, inflammation is a key driver for basically most of, if not all, of our chronic diseases and cancers that currently are ravaging our society.
What's your favorite spice?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, you can't go wrong. Any spice that's coming from a whole food. The only thing you got to be careful with is if you're using a spice mix, oftentimes they'll add loads of sodium. They'll put a ton of salt in your spice mix. And so whenever you're using herbs and spices, I recommend that people either get just an herb or spice, and it's, if you're just getting garlic, or, whether it's, whole garlic or whether it's garlic powder, or whether you're getting turmeric or black pepper or, chili powder, whatever it may be. If it's just that one spice that you're buying, like in bulk at Sprouts or Whole Foods or Walmart, wherever you're buying it, you pretty much know that it's not going to have added sodium. But if it's a spice mix, if it's got a bunch of different spices in it, many spice mixes will throw a ton of sodium in there. And sodium is the leading cause of hypertension, in the world. And there's no doubt about that. Some people want to say, oh, salt really isn't that bad. No, salt is a problem. We consume way too much of it. There's nothing wrong with consuming a little salt, just like a little bit of oil. But just like oil, we get way too much salt in our diet. So it's better if we go for the no salt added spices and other no salt added products when we're cooking, and then add a little bit of salt at the table with your salt shaker, just right on the surface of the food, because that way we're going to taste it the most while using the least. But if we buy foods and spice mixes that already have a bunch of salt incorporated into them, we're going to be, you're not going to taste the salt as much, and you're going to have to use a lot more to get the same amount of flavor. And again, salts, herbs, and spices also, because of all the flavor they bring into food, if we're utilizing them correctly and utilizing a lot of them, we're going to be able to reduce the amount of sodium in our diet because we're getting our flavors from those other foods. Again, citrus is a great replacement for salty foods. And so always try to sprinkle a little bit of, squeeze a little bit of fresh lemon or lime juice, things like that. Vinegar as well. Vinegar has that sour, bitter flavor. So anytime we can use those sour and bitter flavors, they're similar to the receptors that we have on our tongues, those taste buds for salt. And so utilize those first, and then at the table, shake a little bit of salt if you still need that little bit of extra salty flavor.
Thank you. You are an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to nutrition and all this information. I love it. I love it. Thank you again for being on the show. I surely appreciate you and everything you do. I hope to get to see you out there sometime again soon. And
sounds great, Nancy. Thank you for having me on. It's a real blessing.
All right. Take care. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Follow us on Facebook, check out our blog, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.